Thanks everybody for coming along today and giving us an opportunity to demonstrate for you the smoke forecasting system. And so just we have a little bit of a tag team to introduce it today. So I'll hand over to Martin Cope, who's kind of the scientific lead on the work that's been done for the smoke system. So Martin, do you want to say a few words about the background, what was done in order to get to the system that we have now?
Yeah, hi everyone. The background to this is we were approached by DELP 4 years ago now, I guess it was, to pull together a smoke forecasting system that they could use to manage their prescribed burns. And we built that system by basically workshopping heavily with them what their methodology was for undertaking planned burns and where we could, sort of roll into science and technology that would help them with the management of it. And so out of that then came a system which is it's a multi-tier system where we can provide them with forward forecast information from 10 days back to next day. And in order to be able to run the system too, we had to do some additional work within Victoria, where this was targeted at that time to better describe things such as coarse woody debris. We could see one of the issues is dealing with smouldering, particularly overnight, smouldering of heavy fuel. So we went out and did a lot of observation work on that. We also did a lot of observation work on the characteristics of smoke, because it's quite different depending upon the combustion conditions. And also looking at the chemistry of smoke beyond that, because we know that a lot of the smoke particle mass downwind can be dominated by secondary aerosols. And that then constituted the system that was put together and tested, and since then been working, and when I say we, it's us and the Bureau, and it was a bunch of universities, and now it's mainly ourselves, CSIRO and the Bureau, in getting this system into a state where it's reliable and almost operational. I'll hand back to you there.
Thanks, Martin. So the next thing that we want to do is demonstrate it for you online. And so I'm going to hand over to Monica Long, who's the head of fire and air quality in the National Forecast Service as part of the Bureau. So Monica's just going to bring up the website, and this looks like the one for...
Beautiful. Thanks, Beth. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be flicking between some real-time information because it's more interesting in terms of the weather side, and then I'll be moving into study which was based in April this year, because that's more interested from the prescribed burn side. So, but both will be demonstrating the actual functionality of the website. So the first type of information, or the first questions that we want to answer with this system are: will there be dangerous fire conditions in the coming week? Can I schedule fuel reduction burns? And for that, we use the Ensemble fire weather forecast information out to 6 days. So this is found under the fire weather tab on the right side of the screen. So here we've selected show me all the areas that are greater than 25 FFDI, and the units that we're using here are probabilities, so it's 10% up to 90%. So what this is actually showing is what percentage of the ensemble information is of the ensemble members are saying that there will be an FFDI of 25 or greater. So we can see in the out to the northwest, that's a much higher value. We can step through in time and see that these things change. And if I zoom out, we can see that this is available for a larger area, and it changes as we go through time. So these are 3 hourly time steps that go out to 6 days in advance, and it's based on the European ensemble model. The other thing that we've got, if we zoom back into Victoria, in terms of this ensemble information, I'll have a look at Wangaratta as an example. So these blue circles are predefined in collaboration with DELP about areas that they particularly want to know further detailed information about. So if I click on that one for Wangaratta and click on Show Ensemble, then I get this meteogram output, and I'll just explain what each of these things are. So the first one is the wind speed, and this is in kilometres per hour. So again, we have 3 hourly time steps out to those 6 days. The red line...
The following has left the conference.
The red line going through is the ensemble mean, so the average of those ensemble members. And then we have box and whisker plots on either side of those, which show the uncertainty. So the blue box takes us from the 25th to 75th percentile, and then the whiskers are they 10 or 0? 10 to 90?
I think it's...
10 to 90 or 0 to 100?
I think it's 10 to 90.
Yeah, 10 to 90, yeah. So basically that is showing the range of uncertainty. So when you've got a fairly squat little box, you can be quite confident about that the ensemble members are going quite consistently around that variable. And in general, you'll see that there's larger variability later in the forecast period, but you do have some periods, so like the 20th of December, these are larger, there's a larger box around that rather than later on in the period as well. So that can give you some idea of the uncertainty of the range of forecasts. So we have that for, all right, so there's a number of parameters that are shown in this ensemble meteogram. So the first one there is the wind speed in kilometres per hour. Then we have the temperature, 10 degrees Celsius, and you'll see the natural diurnal trend showing through there. We've got the relative humidity. The other thing you'll notice looking at this is that there's larger errors or ranges of potential possibilities from the relative humidity compared with the wind speed and the temperature forecast. Then we have calculated forest fire danger index and how that 3 hour time steps for the next 6 days, as well as grassland fire danger index. And you'll see that in this case, the grassland fire danger index goes off the scale in some things, but there's significantly large areas of uncertainty due to the way that index particularly works. So that's a useful piece of information. The other useful piece of information that I want to highlight is the temperature soundings, or F160s, that are available for that location. So again, 3 hourly time steps right out to the 6 days, and you can click forward the arrows to see how that is expected to change throughout the time period.
Okay, I think those ones are 2 days.
It's only 3 days.
3 days.
3 days.
Max SR.
Okay, thank you. So that's the detailed information about what's going to happen the next few days, can I plan and schedule burns and that type of thing. So the next component of the system is looking at what existing air pollution is there currently in the atmosphere and how is that going to vary over the next 3 days. So for that we use our air quality forecast, and I'll choose the PM 2.5 as a starting point. Turn off those fires because I don't think that's useful. So once again, we can step through time and see how the PM 2.5 concentration would change as we go through the time period. Now this particular scale is shown in micrograms per cubic metre, and the colours have been designed to line up with the warning thresholds and alert thresholds in Victoria. So they will increase as things need to change. If we zoom in a little bit closer, there was actually a fire somewhere out here. You can see that there are higher concentrations reaching up to those next levels on the actual scale in that time period as well.
Click on
So
that?
that's for the PM 2.5, but we can also have a look at the PM 10. We can have a look at the ozone, sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide. And there's also just a generic smoke overall tracer, but the feedback has been that the PM 2.5 is particularly the thing that people are concerned about for health impacts. But we do have a whole lot of species that we're tracking through that system. So the third component that I want to talk about is how we use this for planned burning detailed information. So I'll click back to the demonstration one. So this is an AFAC study. So the question we want to answer here is, if I light my planned burn tomorrow, where will the smoke go and will it cause public health issues? So we can use these prescribed burn forecasts for tomorrow to investigate anxiety or decision making. So on the right, we've got the prescribed burn forecasts. Each of these prescribed 1, 2, 3 can have up to 8 burns in, and they're just grouped so that they run more smoothly on the supercomputer. So that's why that way. So if we have a look at that prescribed one, we step through in time. Now it's probably hard to see straight away with these other things.
Turn those off and zoom in a bit.
And I'll zoom in on there's one that I know is northeast of Bairnsdale. So if we were concerned, okay, we've got to light this burn, it's to the northeast of the Bairnsdale township, will it affect Bairnsdale or not? And see how it grows and changes according to what the model's doing over that period of time. The other thing that we can do with this, as well as having the units, is we can click on any particular point and it will give the concentration of what particular species that we're looking at and the time step. So that is really useful for seeing where exactly is the smoke going to go from that particular burn. And yeah, it changes through overnight. So something on it. So that's an overall demo of the system. We plan to make a demonstration version available for you so that you can have a play, click the buttons yourself, because as someone who is formerly an operational forecaster, that's what I always want to do, is I want to play and click buttons and do all that sort of thing. So we will be making that available for you so that you can investigate what all the buttons do yourself. So we'll send that link and login details for that to you. I guess the point to make here at this point is this is a website we've developed because that was what DELP particularly wanted. We can also provide this information as a data feed that you can ingest into whatever systems that you use. In some ways that's actually easier for us because we don't have to build a web page. But if other jurisdictions coming on board would like a web page view similar to this, then we'd want to make sure that it's a coordinated one. We don't want to be maintaining 7 different web pages. So it would be useful with the ESG group to get some kind of consensus about how the look and feel of the website. So if we have a website, we have one website, and we can do data feeds to wherever. So in terms of the costs, I guess that's something else that people are interested in knowing on this discussion. So the system is currently configured to run optimally for Victoria, Tasmania and the ACT. There is a one-off cost to expand to new jurisdictions, and this is around $38,000. The running costs for the system, of course, become more cost-effective with more jurisdictions coming on board to share those costs, and that's part of the whole idea of having this mechanism to get more people on board so it's more cost-effective for everybody. It does range between $38,000 per jurisdiction with the current setup of VicTas ACT, or decreasing to $26,000 per jurisdiction if we have everyone on board around the whole country. So, of course, each jurisdiction can split those costs with others within their jurisdiction who might be interested. That could be EPAs, it could be other land management groups or health agencies. But our preference would be to have one contact agency per jurisdiction for managing our agreements and all that kind of thing. But if other people are using it, we would be keen to know how that information is being used. So that's sort of the annual running cost side of things and the setup. The other side of the equation where PSG would be looking for investment decisions is about the future science and system development. So Beth is going to talk a bit more about some plans that we've already got regarding science and system development.
Yeah, so thanks, Monica.
And the idea with that would be that the system and science development would be run through the Bushfire and Natural Hazard CRC umbrella because it's improved capability, but it would link directly in with this operational system. So I'm happy to take any questions if people have questions at this stage.
Good day, Monica. It's Dave McKenna here. We're just wondering what sort of vertical profile the models are showing in terms of the smoke. Is that surface level or higher up as well?
Yeah, so the model runs in 3 dimensions, but what is shown here is the surface values. In terms of the data feed, would that still be the surface values that are shown, or would that be at different levels?
To begin with, the surface, but you could always tailor it to output, whatever's needed. For example, aerosol optical depth is the vertically integrated output. I mean, there's lots of options.
So I was just going to say a few words about some of the directions that we're planning to take the system, and I'll split it into science directions and usability directions. I'll start with the usability ones, and I'll go to the science after that. And this is based on some of the feedback that's come back from DELP, things that they'd like to see added, improved, and many of them are ones that were on our list as well, things that we could see could be done even better. So very briefly, some standardization to use the common symbology that's used by the jurisdictions. We'd like to have 24-hour rolling forecasts of average daily PM 2.5, which a lot of health decisions are based on those 24-hour averages. On our boundary layer, which we didn't demonstrate for you, but it's the bottom right corner on the website page.
I can show that.
Yeah, Monica's just going to bring that one up.
Yep.
Oh, any one of those. So this is some information about the boundary layer state, whether it's low boundary layer heights or high, and whether it's lots of wind or not. We'd like to put some wind vectors on there so that you can get that sense of where the air is moving. And we'd also like on the interface to show the names of the planned burns, because they all have got names, and that would be a handy thing to be able to click on it and say this is the blah blah burn. We'd like to include more fire data as the input. At the moment, we collect fire data from the agencies, well, from DELP and ACT in Tasmania, but we aren't, and we get the hotspots as well, but we're not getting the VIRS data in, for example. That's another satellite feed. We're not getting private data fires, CFA fires, and so, just making sure that we've got the right input. That's our best chance of getting the right output. We'd also like to have the capability, when we've started developing it, but it's not ready to roll yet, for clicking individual planned burns on and off to see what is the PM 2.5 if you include this burn or if you exclude this burn. So we're planning to work on that in the coming year. We know we could use improved documentation. There is a help function on here, which is the little I up in the upper right, which brings up a menu system for help for the system, but I think there's improvements that we could make there. We want to do everything we can to help people use it through building capacity, through training, through road shows, whatever you really tell us that you'd like in order to be able to use the forecast effectively. That's a picture of Kevin Parkin, who's our State Control Center meteorologist. Oh, you're not seeing. Okay, no. Sorry. Yep. Yes, thank you. And And then finally, we need to do better with the validation and monitoring. So we didn't have a slideshow up today, but we know from the verification of the smoke forecast that we've got that the basic air quality forecasts are quite good, but our smoke forecasts from prescribed burns, when we're using the Fireflux, the Phoenix Fireflux system, they're putting up a little bit too much smoke. Our verification is showing that, and we need to do some more work to tune that so that we're not getting excessive smoke. This is quite early days for running a fire spread model underneath a smoke model, so yeah, we know that we'll get better. We'd like to use the EPA data from fixed sites, which we're doing in Victoria now, but expanding the EPA data to other locations for verification, and also bringing in the monitoring sites where we can. So when the EPA sends out a portable site because there's some activity going on, let's use that. We'd like to have a display online so you can see how the verification has been going. And there is a project that CSIRO is doing with DELP right now, which is called Real-Time Smoke Intelligence, which is showing satellite and radar and EPA data in real time. We'd like to interface with that, but also then have those things in post-real time so that we can keep an eye on the accuracy of the forecast. On the scientific side, again, there's a lot that is still needed to be investigating. For example, the fire behavior model, I mentioned that we're using the Phoenix Fireflux model. The fire behavior models and fire spread models are still kind of in their infancy. You know, they've been around for a few years, but they're maturing. And we need to understand how well those are working, and particularly for putting the right amount of smoke into the air, which requires getting the heat flux right. We also need to get the plume done right. At the moment, we make some assumptions about plume heights, but realistically, we should be modeling the plume as a function of the atmospheric stability and moisture and so on. The fuel, of course, always a big source of uncertainty. So knowing what the fuel is, how it interacts with the fire behavior modeling, particularly with the coarse woody debris, because that's where the smoldering and the worst polluting worst source of the PM2.5 is coming from. And then finally, on the smoke composition, just making sure that we're doing the best job that we can with what pollution is getting into the air at the source, and also as the smoke ages, how does it evolve, and how does its composition change, and what impacts does that have for the, particularly the PM2.5, but anything that might be impacting on people's health. So I've given you kind of a rundown of the functionality improvements and the science improvements that we're aware would make a better system.
Yeah, so we might pause there and see if there are any questions, because after we have a bit of time for questions, then we can move on to how people are using it. And we've got Natalie, who can talk about, from the DELP perspective, what how they've been using it. But I guess I'll just throw it open to questions at this point.
It's Greg, Monica. Beth was reading off some slides which we didn't have time to load in, but we will give them to Andrew to circulate out at the end of today, so you'll have access to those talking points that Beth was talking to.
Thanks, Greg. I've got Andrew here. We've got Peter Leeson from Queensland Parks. We've got a couple of questions for you.
Yeah. Do you want the questions one at a time, or will I give them all at once?
Whatever you like.
Okay. I was interested in the verification and so on. The plume that you were looking at before looked like a lot of smoke over a fair area, and you were saying that surface being what? Is that actually head height, or is that the bottom 1,000 metres, or it just seemed a lot for what I'm familiar with smoke, whereby you you light the fire, the smoke goes up and away, and it could go over the top of over your head. But on the ground, you're not in too much strife until later on in the evening when it gets calm and still, and the smoke comes back out of the ground. And so I guess I'm interested in how accurate are those surface readings, and does it gel with how smoke normally behaves through the day? That was my first question.
We might pause there at that question. And Martin, did you want to?
Yeah, the way it models the smoke is that we track both the flaming component and the smouldering component. And the flaming component, we assume quite a lofted plume, and the model most that is that the plume hits the top of the boundary layer and gets stuck there. So, and then it can slowly mix down over time, depending on how big the fire is. Whereas the smouldering component is ground-based. For this example here, I'm not sure which component that is.
It's all of them together.
It's all of them together, yeah. So it may be with Phoenix, we are running a little bit hot at the moment, we think. And so you'll see this evolve, I think, quite quickly over time. So does that answer your question? Oh, and I should say too, the lowest layer is 0 to 20 metres.
Okay. No, that's good. The next question I had was around the source size and the ignition rate and that sort of thing. Like the volume of smoke that's generated, is that calculated on some sort of area? Or how do you work out whether it's a small fire or a big fire in the system?
At the moment, Phoenix works it out.
Yeah, so we're running Phoenix, and we have, so there's two versions of Phoenix. There's one that is run for bushfires, and then there's one which is run for planned burns. And the way we run the planned burn version is we take information from you guys on the ground, and the information is, okay, here's what we actually want to burn, and we want to burn it according to these sorts of characteristics. And then that's what goes into Phoenix. And so it will model the time variation of the burning and the smoke emissions, providing that fire then is burned as planned. So it's a cut-down version of Phoenix that's very much targeted at planned burning. So you will see a time evolution of the smoke to the boundaries. And it can, to some degree, represent different lighting patterns as well.
So, Martin, do you want to say something? So we're using Fireflux in Victoria, but in other states, when we're modeling the smoke in other states, we're using a different smoke emission model that you've developed. Do you want to say a few words about that one?
Yeah, so outside of Victoria at the moment, what we're doing is just using what we would call a bulk model, where we get information in on, well, here's the area that's been burnt, and here's the time that it's been burnt over. And from a knowledge of the fuels, we then apportion the smoke emissions over the day, varying those emissions using a sort of McCarthy Fire Danger Index type approach. So that's what's in there at the moment, but the hope is that as more information becomes available, and particularly through you guys, we'd want to be running fire behaviour models, whether it's Phoenix or Spark or, potentially if it could be the WA model or whatever, we'd want to be doing the whole lot prognostic, at least for the next day, and then taking, so you do the next day forecast prognostically, and then you look at what actually burnt, and then you run that to then do the forecast for the following day. So, prognostic, real life in terms of what actually happened, prognostic, you step one to the other. So you've always got the best information going into the system as it moves forward in time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, no, that's good. And
can I just add a little bit to what Martin said too? CSRO and Martin's team has done a lot of work with DELP and with RFS as well, using the bulk scheme that he's just described, and that one is pretty unbiased. The Phoenix one, we see that there are biases, and now we think we can beat those down, but we're still gaining experience with it, to be frank. Yeah, okay.
Yep, thank you. And my last question, I was taken by a story from the US on a highway pile-up in the fog and smoke from a burn, and that rang true for us. We've had similar issues, and I guess I'm particularly interested in that issue. You might be getting to it later, or it might be outside the scope of this, but I guess I was interested in the local scale, like fires within a kilometre of a arterial road, and the likelihood of that combining with fog at midnight after the burn's completed, and that to me is one of the issues we want to try and avoid. So we are particularly interested in the local scale burns combining with fog likelihood. So is there something in this that might help us there?
There will be. Is the short answer, in that we're really working on the next cycle of information that goes in, and part of that is a model for doing particles, which treats the particle growth due to moisture. And so if there is moisture in the forecast, then the particles go bang and grow a lot. So that will be a natural part of the system. Probably what's more challenging for us is scale. The Tier 3 stuff, which is shown up on the screen at the moment, that's around about 1 to 1.5 kilometre grid spacing. So you'll see those effects, but it might be a little bit smeared.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. Of course, that fog issue, it's a visibility issue, not so much an aerosol quality like that. So yeah, it was really around the visibility on highways and airports and that sort of thing is where we probably get our worst grief, rather than the particles and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, where we're moving to, again, with this other component we're rolling in, it doesn't just do PM 2.5, it does nanoparticles up to PM 20, and so then that includes the particle fraction that scatters light and affects the visibility. So that will be sort of rolling in. So can I ask you a question back?
Yeah.
So one of the things that really works for us is working very closely with authorities and people like you to ground truth what's come out of the system. So if we've modelled a particular burn and it's had particular burn characteristics, then getting feedback from as many sources of on-the-ground observations as possible to help ground truth what we're doing and improve it over time. I mean, is that the sort of thing you'd be able to carve out time to do as part, if this sort of system were to be used?
Yeah, I guess we have to think about it a bit. Certainly interesting. Don't really have an answer at this stage.
That's fine. It's just a good way to operate. So whether that's photography, or you guys are going to be flying drones over, or other things to map the area that are being burnt, that's all just fantastic information for us to just continue to improve the system.
How would we collaborate, taking measurements on the ground? Is Is that done down there? Like air quality sampling or something?
It is. Well, to a degree it is, but it's something that's ramping up rapidly with low-cost sensors, for example, being available. I mean, we can talk about it more, but I mean, it's just something that we've found is really helpful in terms of just building the capability for everyone as we go.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, this is all very new to us, so I really can't comment much at this stage.
No worries.
Was that your full list of questions?
Yes, that was it. Thank you. Yeah, sorry to take up everyone's time.
No, that's good. It's good discussion. Are there any other questions from around the country?
Yeah, it's Adam Leavesley from ACT Parks.
Go ahead, Adam.
So I'm new to this. I'm wondering at the present moment how you'd characterise the variation around the prediction. Are you sort of looking at an order of magnitude variation around your prediction, or a couple of times difference, or 30% difference, or something? I mean, what are you sort of expecting in relation to what you're predicting and the amount of smoke you're actually getting?
I think we're starting to try to get a handle on that. We really need to run more smoky days. We had the April cases, and then we were waiting for spring burns in Victoria, and really there wasn't much activity here. So I think this is something that we'll get a better handle on as we go along. But I would say once we get the bias sorted, which is a calibration effort, I would say, it's still going to be a lot of uncertainty. I've come from a rainfall world where there's a lot of uncertainty, and so to me that's sort of a natural thing. But I don't, plus or minus 50% would not be surprising at all. It might be poorer than that even. It's, if you get the wind direction wrong, get the meteorology wrong, even if you've done smoke perfectly, you still get the wrong answer. So there's an awful lot of things you need to get right in order to get the right concentrations. And so we can expect that this is something that will improve over time as our modeling gets better, but I think it's a hard problem to get right, to be frank.
Yeah, no worries. It's just good to understand that in terms of trying to use it. So the second thing is Marty Yebra, who is one of our CRC research partners at ANU, has apparently just got a contract from GA to set up a system that would map potentially fire severity, but certainly the extent of burns. Now, I'm not really sure the time frames for getting all that information out, and also not so sure what the time frames would be for you in calibrating what work you're doing. But it seems to me there could be, in the sense that you're representing the industry in producing this smoke model for us, potentially talking to her quite soon could be really useful for trying to incorporate your needs into what they're doing there with that GA system.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we know Marta through the CRC, and we can get in touch with her about that. And I guess we'll probably should meet as a project and figure out what it is we need to make sure she was going to measure. Yeah. And before we could ask, but that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Adam.
So we also are doing stuff like that. So we do some fire severity mapping of fires, which we haven't done it for many because we haven't had big fires for a while. But we do map our HR burns to 3 classes using Landsat, and we'd be happy to provide that information to you. But there is a time lag in providing that. So that's something we can definitely do, but I kind of see that Marta might take that over at a national, what she's doing might take that over. The other thing is that in terms of, we would be happy to try to do some ground truthing of what smoke we're seeing, but certainly it would be really important there to have some sort of guidelines about how you might do it. We've got no experience in it. If we were going to do it in a sort of a regular way, we'd also have to think about being simple enough and easy enough to potentially have field crews doing that. So I think there could be a fair bit of work. I'm pretty sure other jurisdictions are likely to have similar comments. If we're going to be feeding back smoke calibration data, we need to have a bit of a protocol from you.
Martin, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a thought as to how we can sort of build up this information quickly. But yeah, we can certainly put together a method that would be sort of simple to apply and would just really value add to what we're trying to do.
I mean, it might even be as simple a starting place as just pulling out your phone and taking a picture of the plume. Because we know that our plume calculations need some more science in them and some validation and so on. That would be a good start. But yeah, we'll try and pull something together.
Cool. That's all from me.
Great. Thanks very much, Adam. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Lockie McCaw from WA, Parks and Wildlife. Yeah, look, first comment would be it's really exciting and looks like a great system you've got developing there. So I think that's a real step forward on what we've been operating on for the last decade. When it comes to monitoring, certainly in our southwest forest areas in WA, we routinely use light aircraft for as spotters, fire detection, and also for reporting activity around prescribed burning. So I'm sure there would be opportunities where we could get information about plume height, characteristics, photographs, that sort of thing from our spotter fleet, which could be useful. And I think we might have done that in the past, actually, with the first version of Alan Wayne's model.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Yep. Oh, g'day, Alan. I didn't realise you were online. A couple of questions. I think probably the first one to you, Beth, is about the computing power and whether that's sufficient to run the model at consistent resolution on a continental scale, or would you need to have sort of nested domains of different resolution?
So we do nested the domains. So there's the meteorology model, which is the axis model that the Bureau runs operations, which is a 12-kilometer model nationally, and then we have the smaller regional domains centered on the capital cities, but really kind of covering part of the state, which are now running at 1.5 kilometers. So the meteorology comes on a few different resolutions, and then the chemistry modeling also comes on a couple different resolutions. So nationally, it starts at 27 kilometers, and then in our current setup, in southeastern Australia, the next one is 9 kilometers, and then over Victoria and Tasmania, the final nest is 3 kilometers. Is that right, Martin?
Yeah, for the full chemistry version.
The full chemistry. The planned burn one, or Tier 3 that we've sort of nicknamed it, is a 1 kilometer run. Is that right?
1 to 1.5.
1 to 1.5 kilometer run. And so those are, at the moment, they're all fixed domains. They're not relocatable, just plunk it down anywhere. That's something that could be talked about in the future, but that's probably some ways off before we would be able to do that. But having that sort of 1 kilometer resolution nationally is probably beyond us with our computing right now. It's just a little too expensive. Yep. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, there's a bit of complexity in there, which is understandable. But yeah, we could talk about that, I guess, in more state or jurisdictional-centred discussions.
Yeah.
And I suppose my second question is probably to Martin. You talked a bit about the importance of the coarse woody debris, the emissions profile, and I just wondered if there were any particular attributes of the woody debris that are known to be important in that, or is that still a research topic that's fairly?
There are some important attributes. Would you like to talk about it? Can I throw this to Fabian, who's with me and who did a lot of the observation work on emissions and coarse woody debris?
So there's definitely some uncertainty. So we have done experimental testing at prescribed burns in Victoria, where we did measurements on smoke emissions. So we distinctly looked at the flaming components and then the smouldering components, and we could see some big differences in the smouldering ones, especially in terms of particle emissions. So we want to delve a bit more into it to see when we have the glowing combustion of the coarse woody debris versus more of the smouldering where we see lots of particle emissions coming off, and to understand sort of which conditions and what proportion of the coarse woody debris would go more into the glowing combustion compared to the pyrolysis. So that's something that we would really be interested in further sort of researching.
Okay, yeah. Well, obviously some interesting work to do there.
Yep.
Peter Leeson here. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, just on that point, we've got a rule of thumb here around KBDI. On the assumption that we're talking low intensity fires, mild fires, planned burn fires, when the KBDI exceeds 100, you start to get all that coarse woody debris igniting, below that, up to say 80, you tend to have very little igniting. I know higher intensity fires and heavier fuel fires, that changes, but assuming you can keep the fire intensity low, the KBDI is a good trigger for when the smouldering becomes an issue. I don't know if that's of any use to you. That's one of the reasons why we target planned burns below 100 KBDI, because that's when the blackout becomes problematic and trees start to come down and we're losing habitat. Back to you.
Yeah, that's just a really useful thing to know, because we actually sort of treat, as Fabian was saying, the coarse woody debris emissions differently to the fine fuels, and you can in principle then look at, here's the difference, so say you do run a more intense fire, there's more plume rise, but it triggers the coarse woody debris to ignite. What's then the difference if you do that versus keeping the fire intensity much lower, no coarse woody debris emissions, but lower plume rise? So it's the sort of thing it's interesting to look at, and that's very helpful sort of on-the-ground knowledge that you've just provided there. Thanks.
It'd be interesting to throw that into our April paper and see if we can get rid of some of that smoke.
Right, any other further questions at this point? All right, we'll throw back to Andrew, and I think Natalie is going to be coming up next to talk about how they've actually used.
Yep, thanks, Monica. Can you bring up that slide, please? Just slide 2 on the presentation.
Yep.
Could be slide 1, that's it. Okay.
Oh, that one?
That one there, thanks. Yep, so I think that was really good. Thanks, Beth, Monica and co. Natalie, we'll throw over to you to get an end-user perspective from Del. Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name's Natalie Tosteresnik. I'm the Manager of Predictive Services here in Victoria. I've been working a lot with BOM and CSIRO teams to translate some of the science into an operational model. Over the last 2 years in particular, we've been really focusing on building a strong collaborative arrangement and working towards building a product that was not only easy to use but directly met the needs of different users. And I think that you can probably see that in the interface, in that at the front end it looks quite simple and straightforward, but there are a lot of opportunities for people who have more knowledge or want to learn more about how the model is produced to be able to gain that information by looking at the ventilation index or individual weather parameters behind the the modelling as well. So we've had really good feedback on the methodology and the design principles that have been there. Some training was done last year and the year before, so I think that there's still a lot of opportunities for us to do more in that. But by being quite open and honest with our users about what the strengths and weaknesses of the system are, they've really got on board, and we've got a lot of regional uptake as well as centralised uptake of the system as a response. As you can understand, the model incorporates a lot of different elements, so good data in is good data out. So, for example, it's been quite hard for us to incorporate some of the private data that's from, in particular, stubble burns, and that's been quite a challenge, but by being transparent with our users, they have been able to balance that out in their decision making. The other thing about the model that we're getting great feedback in is you can zoom in onto individual burns, but the model is fundamentally cumulative. So you can see how that cumulative effect throughout the planned burn season has an effect on smoke across the state. So far we've seen users ranging from people putting out community advice, so seeing that the day ahead might lead to smoke pooling in a certain region. We've been able to be proactive and provide that advice to communities, which has been, we've had really great positive feedback from those communities as a response. We've also been able to give that information to our emergency response O operators so that they've got some information behind them to say, well, we do understand that there's smoke in the region, so be aware but not alarmed if you do see smoke. Our planned burn decision makers have definitely been using the tool to gain a better understanding of how the cumulative effect of smoke is behaving across the state, and has been used to make more broad-scale decisions about what burns will and won't go. We've also seen the model used to help inform where we're putting detectors so that we can have the best understanding of how smoke is behaving on the ground. So that's been extremely useful. Currently, we found the model, it's still pre-operational, and I think that's been reflected in the reliability. We've had excellent response from BOM, but at the same time, we need to get across the line to make it operational so that we can have the reliability and the backup systems in place and the support available to be able to make that system extremely robust. And yeah, I think that we've had a really good experience with the model and had excellent feedback from our users. And interested in if anyone has any questions about how we've used it operationally. One thing that I just want to really emphasise is the importance of not just getting, I think it's a really good opportunity for all of the states and territories to come on board with the utilisation of the model. We've really had an excellent experience with it and haven't seen anything like this anywhere else. It's worked really well. It has run a little bit hot, but the transport's been really good. But for us to keep making progress in this area, we need to really continue partnering up the research investment with the operational use of the model. I think that's been really how we've been able to get this model up and running in what is relatively a pretty short period of time.
Well done, Natalie. Andrew here. I've got a question about, I'm impressed that you've got private landholders providing input. How onerous is it for people to input data, and how much training is involved in that?
That's actually one of our biggest challenges in getting private burn data. Not only do you not know if they're going to burn that day, but the time of day has a big impact as well. So what Martin's actually working on at the moment is a project that will try and utilise different methodologies to pick up some of these burns that we can't pick up through reporting lines. So utilisation of things like satellite imagery, there's a lot of potential there for us to pick up some of those hotspots and directly incorporate it into the model. So that's definitely one of our challenges.
Yeah, and for your regional staff, or just for staff inputting the data, how much training is involved in that, and how onerous is that on them, and you're saying you have good uptake, so that must be very positive. They're getting value out of it.
Yeah, we've already got an fire management system in which people who want to be doing their planned burns enter all the data at the end. There's a 3-year fire operations plan, so all the burns are entered into that, and then slowly that gets funneled throughout the season. And then the day before a burn, people will submit that into the system, and then if that's approved by 2 p.m, it'll then turn up smoke model. So we've already got a lot of the mechanisms in place that we've been able to utilise to translate the data that we're collecting and the planned burn information to put into the model.
Lovely. Natalie, Sherry from Fuel Reduction Unit. TFF. Nope.
Sorry, can you say that question again?
Sorry, Natalie, it's Michelle Richards here from the TFF. Now, one of the things that we do quite often is burn an area over the course of 3 or 4 days. I was wondering if you guys have done that kind of thing and how you've gone in terms of feeding that kind of info into the system.
That's one of the areas where I see that from the DELT side we need to put more effort and investment into improving the data input system so that we can get better transparency and better information into the model as to not just what the area is to be burnt, the expected area that we expect to burn each day. And I think that might actually be why the model, and Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, part of the reason why the model might run a bit hot.
Okay, thanks, Natalie.
Yeah, just a comment on that. So Alan and I have been working on extending the model forecast out to 3 days. And in fact, we were working on, well, if a burn's going to go, what proportion of the area would be burnt from day to day. And so that's how we were going to allocate it. So that's for sort of forward-looking with planned burns. The other thing is if a burn is going from day to day, then provided it's clear, we can pick it up by satellite, and that ensures it stays in the system. So that's for the actual, flaming part with where it's very hot. We're also, day to day, we've got the smouldering slowly ramping down over time, and that in the system does extend for a few days.
Are there any other questions?
Lawrence from New South Wales.
Hi, Lawrence.
Hi, Natalie. One of the issues we have with our system is the interpretation of, we get a particular output from the model and turning that into what does that mean to the people on the ground. I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts or processes in place or future plans for that messaging.
One of the great things that we've got in the model is that I think I mentioned it before, you can look as shallow or as deep into the model as you like. So we're seeing that for people who are doing community warnings and that type of work, they can look at the model and directly correlate the colours to some of our existing communication guidance. So we've got community air quality health standards, and so the colours that are in the model actually directly reflect what you're meant to do in regards to community messaging associated with that. Does that answer your question?
Oh, sort of. I mean, we do a similar thing with our model, but I guess there's one thing for the health implications, but it's another thing for what are people's expectations, like at those higher thresholds? Are people, eyes watering? Are they coughing and spluttering and not able to go outside? And at the lower end, sort of smelling smoke and, what do they see? I think there was a visual guide prepared in the States, I think in California, for various particulate levels that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's something that we've been talking to Martin about as well, the potential of getting things like haze, and I have titled it sniffability, to indicate, you know, what the various triggers are amongst our community. We did a user needs assessment alongside this project over the last year, and we went out and spoke to people about what they cared about in regards to communities. We spoke to communities to talk about, when it came to smoke, what they were looking for. So I think we've got some good indicators of what we need to do to better inform them about things that they care about. So yeah, I think that haze index would be something we'd really like to see some work on. And Fabienne is actually leading some work as well in regards to community health impacts of smoke, and so is University of Tasmania. So there's definitely a lot of work that we've invested in that part of what does this actually mean for people.
Okay, thanks for that.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, it's Tim here from Queensland. Just on that last point, you're talking about the colour coding. Is that a national-based system, or is that just based on Victorian-type EPA codes?
Yeah, that's a Victorian-specific one. So I think that there definitely need to be some conversations had about if this was going to go national, how do we standardise? Beth brought that up earlier. How would we standardise it so that it was designed in a way that you could easily make directly relevant to the needs of each state, or make some agreements about what it would actually look like.
Cool. Thanks, Natalie. It sounds like if there aren't any more questions, we'll throw over to you, Lawrence. Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
just bringing your slides up, Lawrence. They might take a second to load up.
Yeah.
We're starting to be...
Yeah, I've got it on my screen. I don't think the purpose of today was to, have a model off and compare the, but it was more to highlight, the future directions and the operational implementation of our experience in New South Wales with our smoke modelling. So I won't talk to all of these slides, and I'll try and keep it fairly brief. How much time we got, Andrew?
I'll give it 10 minutes, Lawrence.
Yeah, I know. All right, so I guess increasingly for us, there's context to what we're doing, and we set up our system particularly to support prescribed burning, and it wasn't necessarily designed for wildfire, but there's been some recent smoke events that have really, where we've had cumulative impacts, and smoke inversions have really put pressure on the model, put pressure on us to improve our systems. And so we originally intended just to set up a system to provide tactical information to our prescribed burn planners. And more and more we're using the model, I guess in more of a strategic sense, to look at the broader impact perhaps on the Sydney Basin of what's going on for our whole burn program. So that's all I want to talk about here. I think everybody's seen presentations of our system. I've got a slide there just showing the outputs. It's similar to the Victorian system where, that's an old example we've got there of the 2D map showing the density and trajectory of the smoke plume forecast, and we play that through time. So we've got some limitations of that system, and last year we embarked on a 3D smoke plume modelling project. So We've had some evaluations done on our model, and we've improved it based on those evaluations. We've also put it into the cloud so we can run it quicker, and it's a bit more resilient for us. So that's an example. There's a screenshot of our new system with burns, and that's the input screen. So, I mean, in terms of our operational experience, as Natalie said, one of the biggest challenges is collating the data for the burn inputs, and you know, the timing, duration, and lighting patterns of the burns, and I guess gaining the experience of knowing how the model runs and how to manipulate the model to best reflect what's going on the ground has been one of the lessons we've learnt over the past few years. Our modelling, so we have small and large domain, and the resolution of our modelling, got Ian here with me, and we're questioning whether it's 500 metres or a kilometre resolution. We're not quite sure. Martin might be able to help us.
I think it's a kilometre, is it?
Yeah, it sounds about right, Martin. Kilometre sounds good. So we get fairly high resolution modelling for these smaller burns. Well, not smaller burns, but individual burns, and we're able to zoom in like the new Victorian, we'll call it Victorian model for the sake of, what's it called, AQFX. And there's an example of our 3D output. So we take those various slices that the model generates, and we can put it into a viewer that we can pan and zoom and look around like you would on Google Earth, for example. Another example of the output. There's the design of the system. Won't go into that. Some of our inputs, and probably what I wanted to talk about is the limitations really of our model, and it comes back to the original intent of the model. So, you know, particularly for us, our model's not able, well, we don't have the ability to model the cumulative impact, and we know from evaluations and from operational experience that the overnight performance and the influence of radiation inversions is a real limitation to the model. We're seeing burns disappear off the map overnight, and we've come up with ways of tweaking the model to improve that, but I think it's kind of like it's probably not that rigorous from a scientific perspective, but so cumulative impact of overnight performance. We know from our Uni evaluation that we're missing the peaks and troughs. So what we do is we average the emissions over the period that we're lighting, whereas we know in a practical sense that when we're doing prescribed burns, depending on the ignition patterns, we'll get peaks and troughs in those in the smoke given off by those fires, and so it's a real challenge for us trying to replicate that in the model. And so in the Uni Wollongong evaluation, we really didn't the density of the smoke really under-predicting. So, and I spoke about that point as well, about the relationship between the smoke, or the particular density forecast by the model, and what people can see and smell, and that's something that particularly our public liaison or our media unit are particularly interested in, because we really need to try and improve our messaging to people on the ground. What does this mean? So what we have done as part of this 3D smoke modelling project, we did evaluation of the performance of the AQFX for the Mother's Day event, and Martin conducted that study for us, and we found that, Martin found that the model performed really quite well, and it was able to pick up peaks and troughs in particulate or smoke density really quite well, and although we didn't run our model in the study, we thought it did a much better job of picking that Mother's Day event. Did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, that was a challenging event. It was one of those cases where getting the sea breeze timing and the inland extent of it correct made a lot of the difference. And I guess we ran the for that one, and on that day the model, so the Bureau model, is probably a little bit better, and that probably made a lot of that difference.
So what we see the strengths of the new AQFX in comparison to our model is that, in particular, you can obviously model the cumulative impact of the smoke, and with these prolonged smoke pollution events that we've had over the last couple of seasons, there is more and more scrutiny on what we're doing with prescribed burning, so being able to model the cumulative impact, potentially overnight performance, I see that as a real potentially leap forward for us in terms of improving our public messaging, go down that path. And obviously one of the other limitations of our system is that we don't consider other sources of pollution. And so being able to consider that in conjunction with the smoke can obviously help with that messaging as well, the public messaging. How much are we contributing to the current smoke event might be something very useful for us politically. And the other strength, and what we're thinking about at the moment, is that strategic versus tactical modelling. We have a high resolution, potentially maybe in the future the AQFX might be higher resolution, but at the moment our model could be used effectively for that tactical modelling, for the prescribed burn implementation, whereas we could use something like the AQFX for more strategic regional impacts and looking at those regional impacts in a cumulative sense. So the other issue, of course, is that we haven't really configured our model for wildfire events, although we do use it for fires. It was mainly designed for prescribed burning, so the AQFX have that benefit as well of including the wildfires. So what we're thinking about for the future at the moment is potentially a consensus forecasting system where we run both systems in parallel, and we have, you think about how the Bureau runs their forecasting. They have several models running in parallel, and they obviously have their forecast, well, they don't obviously, but they have their forecast policy for the day. So we're thinking about a system whereby we can run potentially both these models and potentially other models in parallel, and picking the model that works the best, and also looking at using the models in a strategic or tactical sense as well. We're thinking about because data input is a real issue, as in finding the model inputs and getting this information, we're thinking about a common interface that potentially could fire off these inputs to the various models, and then have the models return their results to a common interface to display them as well. So that's our current thinking, and don't have approval to or funding for that yet, but we're certainly hoping to head down that path. So I think I've said enough. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Lawrence. Anyone got any questions for Lawrence?
Yeah, Lawrence, it's Beth. I'm interested in the common interface for the inputs and the outputs. So that's suggesting that for the AQFX that you would really want to be using the data from the models as opposed to, say, the web display that we've demonstrated today. Is that a fair statement?
We really like the products from the forecast demonstration project you've got in there as well, Beth. So,
so you might want parts of the display anyway, and then also to have your own interface.
Potentially.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Have our cake and eat it.
Yeah. Any other questions for Lawrence? No. Good stuff. Thanks, Lawrence. We will. Are there any other questions before we wrap it up for any of the presenters from the Bureau or for Natalie? Nothing heard? Okay. On that note, I will thank everybody for their time. Especially thanks to Greg and for their preparations, and for Natalie and Lawrence providing their perspectives. All very valuable, and I'm sure it'll spark lots of ongoing conversations and thinking. Certainly, you know, it's certainly where we have to go, and it'd be nice if we're leading it rather than being dragged there. And look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Beth, Martin, Monica, and everyone else who dialed in.
Thanks, Andy.